Hey Frank, how you going, man? It's good to see you
I,
again.
it is great to see you again, man. I'm very well, thank you. It is, of course, a weird time of day here compared to you. It's first thing in the morning. I'm still wearing my dressing gown, but I'm very well. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I've just been doing Mudvayne and Coal Chamber gig for the last 3 days as a runner.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Have you finished doing that now?
Yeah, yeah. It was
Oh,
actually
that's a
like
shame. But I was going to say you could have told. Oh my goodness, Des Fafra, isn't that his
yeah,
name?
yep.
Yeah. I went to see Cold Chamber when I was about 14. They were like my second ever gig.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
That's
And,
amazing.
and I had Des Fafra hair at the time as well, sort of shaved with funny bits at
Oh,
the front.
brilliant. That's unreal.
I mean, that's
Anyway,
that's the thing I don't. That's the bit of my past that I always like. Yeah, I was into punk rock when I was a kid, and that was the whole
yeah.
deal. But like, yeah, I had a new metal phase as well.
I think we all had a new metal phase, didn't we?
Yeah, yeah. You know what? I will still back the first Korn album to the hilt,
Oh,
but that's a conversation for
100%.
another time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll kick off. Okay. Frank, welcome back to Everblack, man. It's fantastic to have you here.
Thank you for having me back. It's nice to be here.
So last year you graced our shores and delivered just some absolutely outstanding shows.
Thank you.
For me, that was my gig of 2023. So firstly,
Oh,
thank you for allowing me to review and shoot that show. That was highly
that's very
emotional for
kind.
me.
Yeah, that's very
Um,
kind.
how did you find the Aussie audiences to be?
Great. I mean, I've always loved touring in Australia. Like my first tour in 2010 was almost kind of a dare because Chuck Reagan had told me for ages that Australian audiences were amazing, and I was like, okay, fine, show me. So he took me to Australia for the first time, and I was like, okay, fine, you're right. Um, uh, but and I've been back many times since. What was lovely about 2023, I did 2 visits in one year to Australia from the UK, which is a lot, let's say. The jet lag and the air miles, yikes. But I had a sort of first round sort of coming back post pandemic with my friends in Counting Crows, but coming back for the headline shows at the end of last year was awesome because, I was sort of pleasantly reminded that there is an audience there and that there are people who care about what I do and that they're lovely and friendly and enthusiastic. It was also lovely because my drummer Callum had never been, he's a new drummer in my band, he'd never been to Australia
Yeah,
before.
he
And he
was
was having a
moving to
good
Brisbane,
time.
isn't he?
I think he said he was moving everywhere,
Yeah.
in fairness. But the thing is, that wasn't cynical. He's a man free of cynicism. Like every city we went to, he was like, "This place is amazing," it just gets on Right Move or whatever, starts looking up, and it was like, "Please don't move to Australia. I love Australia. Don't get me wrong, but it's going to make band practice nightmarishly hard to organise."
So while you were here, of course, you played Do One uh, at the Tivoli. I got to see it there. Now this is from the upcoming album Undefeated. From your perspective, how did it feel, firstly, the performance of said songs, and secondly, how do you feel they were received by the crowd?
I mean, performing new stuff's always kind of a weird mix of like euphoria and nerves and all the rest of it. And like, do one specifically, it's clearly a song that's kind of written for a bit of crowd participation. And if I remember correctly, I was kind of geeing people up to teaching them to sing along
Yeah.
prior and all this sort of thing. So there's a little bit of a vibe of kind of like pulling the car up the hill. Do you know what I mean? And like hopefully, now that the song is out properly and all the rest, next time we come down, I won't have to do the teaching people bit at the start. Just play the bloody song. But no, it felt really good, and I felt like it was really well received. I mean, it's a song that I wrote actually in March last year when I was in New Zealand and Australia. I think I wrote it in Wellington, New Zealand, actually. But it was the final song I wrote for the record. I'd kind of started talking about what the new record was going to be like, and this has happened more than once in my life. The rhetoric around the album, it suddenly becomes like, oh, actually, hold on, wait a minute. I need to write one more song to kind of make that true. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I kind of argued myself into writing that song. But it came together quickly. Some songs take me like 2, 3 years to write, and this
Yeah.
one took about 2 hours, and it just sort of felt right, and it landed in the way I wanted it to, and I'm excited to. That was kind of the first tour where we were playing it like solidly in the set, and the Australians talked me into it in terms of releasing it as a single. So thank you.
Brilliant. Now, as I said, I only heard it at the Tivoli, and I'm a bit of a traditionalist when it comes to album releases. So I actually I wait for the album to come out so I can actually hear how it ebbs and flows. Now, we've touched base on this on past chats. When you lay out an album, do you go with like how it flows right, or is it more about the individual song, or do they need to flow to tell a story somehow?
I think I'm old-fashioned in this. They need to flow. I believe in the album as a kind of art form as well. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of people have spent a lot of time recently talking about how streaming services have kind of destroyed that concept. And I suppose that's true. You know, people can, if they can be asked, kind of put a playlist together with the songs in different order, or, you know, only just listen to one or two songs or whatever it might be. But I don't really see why any of that means that I have to stop caring about the kind of narrative flow of an album as a whole. I'm still going to pay attention to that. I spend a ton of time thinking about that. Actually, in the specific instance of this record, we were like inches away from sending it off to get pressed on vinyl, and I was like, "Stop!"
Please tell me you screamed like, "Stop the presses."
Nearly. I mean, I'm not actually in direct communication with the vinyl pressing plant, but you know what I mean. I've sort of sent us all caps email being like, wait a minute, and moved everything around. And yeah, it was kind of fun. Like, there were so many different options because I think about, you know, what's the first song, but also what's the first song aside two, and what's the last song aside one, and like, you know, are any two songs next to each other in the same key? And if they are, is that good or is it bad? And like, you know, where do you put the fast ones? Where do you put the songs? All this kind of thing. You know, there was one song that was always going to be the last song on the record, but aside from that, it's been up and down and all over the shop. And I think we've landed in a good place.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Right.
So, I mean, the touring just never seems to stop for you. There always seems to be dates being announced. Now, you seem to be very methodical and precise with who your support acts are, and from my experience at the gig at the Tivoli, the support acts really complemented the FTHC album. Now, this may rock the boat between you and your lovely wife, but who would support who on a tour?
Between me and Jess?
Yeah.
I mean, well, we have toured together once or twice, and she's come out and played before me in the UK. I hesitate to use the word support because I'll probably get in trouble. But I mean, we've talked about doing more of that kind of thing. Like, I'm not sure we're quite at the point of making the kind of Tammy and George duet record yet. That said, I'm the biggest George Jones fan that you've met today. So it's possible that kind of thing. The problem is I adore George Jones and I adore classic 70s country, and my wife really doesn't. Like, she's a folky, not a country person. Yeah. And boy, there's a difference. So, you know, we have some let's park that idea for a second. But yeah, we've toured together, and we will again. I mean, I'm not sure when we'll get Australia on the books, but maybe one day. We'll see.
Yeah, that'd be amazing. Now, of course, like with the whole collaboration thing, any special guests that we can look forward to on Undefeated?
Well, okay,
so you can let out of the bag.
Yeah, sure. I mean, what I will say is that, like, basically, there's an interesting thing happening more broadly in music right now. The whole thing of like collaborations is something that, like, the hip hop world figured out years ago as being a cool idea, and the rock world, broadly writ, kind of went, no, thank you. And now we're all kind of going, oh, wait a minute, that's cool. So there's a bunch coming. There's not so many on the album proper, but for example, we've put out. Sorry, I'm just going to plug my laptop in while we talk, otherwise I'll disappear. We've put out a German version of the song "Do One" that is a collaboration with my friend Ingo, who is a brilliant songwriter in the band The Do Nots. One second. But is also someone who speaks German. So he did the translation. and that helped. But we are also working on similar things for that song in different languages. We're also talking to a couple of Australian bands about some collab stuff. I can't quite talk about that just yet. But yeah, there's some cool stuff in the pipeline in terms of kind of spreading the love, which is kind of new for me, I will say. But I really enjoy it. It's kind of a different type of creativity. Yeah, I'm into it. It's kind of fun.
Awesome. Now, as I said before, the album, like I feel an album has to flow right. So is there a thought process that goes into choosing a collaborator for an album, like depending on like the theme that you're trying to achieve with said album?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're all grown up, so there's a degree to which like you want to collaborate with somebody sort of who's going to bring a new audience to the table. That's part of one of the reasons why you might do a collaboration. But also, there are hopefully also, if not overwhelmingly, kind of artistic and creative reasons for doing that. You know what I mean? I mean, in the past, I had Esme Patterson sing on a song on Positive Songs and stuff like that. There's been Simon Neil from Biff Clyro sung on a song on FTHC, which was really cool as well. So there's, but I mean, in Simon's case, Simon is a very old friend of mine, and we've known each other for a very long time, and it was just there was a slight kind of tone of screechiness that I was looking for, and it was like, I know a guy, and he nailed it into the ground. Of course he did. There's hopefully there's a lot of thought that goes into it. Let's say that.
Cool. So I hit the big 4-2 last week, the life, the universe, and everything year. To me, that is making sure that I grab life by the balls and twist it very, very, very hard. What's your perspective on a life well lived, and where does the term undefeated fit into that?
Big questions. I mean, first of all, happy birthday for last week.
Thank you.
I hit the big 4-2 at the end of last year, so we're on the same Douglas Adams stretch.
Yeah.
For the time being. I mean, in a way, 43 is going to be a bit like, oh, at least I had Douglas Adams last year.
Yeah.
Anyway, I mean, a life well lived. Who knows? I suspect I'm not necessarily the best person to answer that question, and or perhaps ask me again in like 30 years' time if I'm still kicking. But I mean, I've long been slightly haunted by the kind of by the fact that life is short. I happen to not really believe in any afterlife type thing, so it's kind of like, well, get on with it to a degree. Do you know what I mean? It's like there are so many more things that you could do than you'll have time to do. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a paleontologist, and I wanted to be a science fiction author, and I wanted to be a musician. And it's like, you can't really do all three of those things, Bruce Dickinson notwithstanding. You've got to sort of make some choices at some point. But nevertheless, like, just get on with it. Do you know what I mean? Just like whatever it is you want to do, get on with it. And the older, that's the thing I've been saying for a long time. The older I get, you realize you do have to kind of like take a bit more physical care. It's possible to burn yourself out, to destroy your body trying to pursue all of these things. So there is a degree of kind of like moderation to be brought in. But I think just being open and sort of inquisitive and ready to say yes is a good attitude to life. I would
very
say.
much so.
And then Undefeated, I mean, that kind of relates to that to a degree. There's a degree with this record where there's a bit of a kind of middle fingers to the critics kind of vibe. I don't want to sound quite like it's 100% that, because that the more that if you constantly talk about how much you don't care, then you self-evidently care. You know what I mean? But I mean, there is this like, hey, I'm still, as the song Do One says, I'm still standing up, I'm still doing what I do. And that just, when I was a kid, I got actively discouraged from doing what I do by my teachers, by my parents, by my friends. Everyone told me not to try. And then when I did try, everybody laughed and said it wasn't going to last. And then even when we got to the point of having like, a proper tour and a few people coming, everyone was like, don't get used to this. It's not going to last. And you know what? I'm 42 and it did last.
Yeah.
And I did it without any help from anybody else. And well, that's not strictly true, but like with lots of help from lots of people. But like I did it without help from kind of, like I say, sort of, parents and educational establishments and all the rest of it. And I'm kind of proud of that, and usually I'm quietly proud of it, but on this album, there's a bit more noise.
Awesome. So from an outsider's perspective, I feel that Undefeated is going to be a bit of a roll on from punches. Um,
Yeah,
like sort of, roll with the punches and then bang, let's launch straight into I'm undefeated.
punch back. There we go. That's what this record's about. Lovely. Thank you very much. I'll be using that quote.
Um, yeah, like so it's a direct roll on from that. Now without the risk of running the risk of sounding flattering, I'm not sure if I've heard a bad Frank Turner song.
Right.
So what is the secret to making great music continuously?
I mean, I would arguably be front of the queue to dispute that last statement. It's very generous of you, and thank you very much. But like, there's some things I might do slightly differently second time around. Let's say that. But I mean, I don't know. Like, I think first of all, I'm 100% the worst person to ask that question. So, he said, trying to escape from having to answer it. But at the same time, I would say that. There is a thing that I do when I'm writing if I'm kind of having any kind of doubts or getting stuck or anything like that, which is try and remind myself how it all started out, which was sitting in my bedroom with a guitar just trying to make up a cool song. In a funny way, I like the term make up a song rather than write a song because it feels more kind of like honest to what the process is to me somehow. To write a song sounds very kind of highfalutin, you know what I mean? Whereas it's just kind of like, and people ask like, how do you write songs? And to some degree, it's just like you think about what a cool song would sound like, and then you play that, yeah, and it sounds kind of childish almost saying it that way, but that is at the heart of it. And the crucial thing for me is that when I was doing that, I wasn't thinking all that hard about what other people were going to think. It was more just kind of like what would be cool. What would I think would be cool? And the songs came the way that they came. So, there was a degree of kind of shutting the world out, I think, which is part of my process, should we say. But ultimately, yeah, I don't really know is the short answer to your question. And I'm very sort of pleasantly surprised and grateful that somebody like you could make a statement like you just made. Thank you.
Not a problem. Now, with your writing process, do you find it easier to write while you're on the road to fill time, or is it easier just to sit at home and chill and strum the guitar and?
I would say that actually the writing is an at least two-stage process, and they fit into different things. The bit where you're kind of fishing for basic starting ideas, whether it's a riff or a 4 lines of lyrics or whatever it might be. That stuff tends to happen more when I'm on tour, simply because I'm kind of around and engaged in playing music so actively all the time. You're always humming a guitar in soundcheck in a radio session and during the gig. But then you sort of end up with notepads and kind of folders full of sound clips, and those aren't songs, and at some point you have to sit down and actually do the grunt work of hammering those into songs. And that tends to be a thing that I now these days in my old age that I set aside time to do. I mean, funnily enough, actually, with the new record with Undefeated, I actually did the vast majority of the kind of the perspiration part of writing, the kind of just sitting down and grinding through it. I actually did on tour, but we were opening for a band called Billy Talent in Europe, and they were really big shows, so nice spacious dressing rooms, but we're the sport act, so we didn't have to play for that long or sound check that early or anything like that. So I had all this time, so every day I would just find myself a room, set up, guitar, notepad, dictaphone, and it was like, let's write some songs. And yeah, so that's why the majority of it came together. But I mean, and having said anything I'm saying, like, there's no rhyme or reason to it for me. There's no hard and fast rules. Like, sometimes I write a song in the shower, and sometimes I write a song during sound check, and sometimes I write a song over a 5-year period of screaming at my notepad. And there's different ways that this happens.
Amazing. Okay, final question. You have to choose one, and it has to be definitive. Hardcore punk or folk music?
I mean, oh, do I? I mean, if you're going to put a gun to my head, I'm probably going to choose hardcore punk. But I mean, I think that it's self-evidently folk music is a kind of like emotionally broader type of music. There's more different things to be said, and I think there's probably more subtlety and nuance.
Yeah.
And there's a broader appeal, which is actually a thing that shouldn't be sniffed at. If music is a form of communication, that is a thing that is worthy of consideration. And it doesn't really matter how important it is, the things that Dillinger Escape Plan have to say. There's a limited number of people who are going to listen to them. You know what I mean? Whereas you listen to Ellie Dillon, and there's a world to listen. But having said all of that shit, there's a certain kind of pulse rate that I'm only ever really going to hit listening to Black Flag and Minor Threat, Dead Kennedys, Bad Brains, Converge, Dillinger Escape Plan, Botch, Cave In. I'll be here for days. It's kind of deeper ingrained in my DNA, let's say. So fine, hardcore punk.
Hardcore punk. I would have accepted like a merge of the two.
Damn it, I didn't know that was an option.
Okay, well, on that note, everyone, please check out Undefeated. It is being released on May 5th. I have May 3rd. May 3rd. Sorry.
May 3rd. May the 3rd be with you.
Pre-order the CD, the vinyl, pre-order everything. You're not going to be disappointed. Please do so. Frank, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a pleasure as always, my good friend.
It is always a pleasure to chat to you, man. And hopefully I will see you again before the year is out. He said not making any commitments or doing anything other than touching various bits of his face.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Frank.